All right, welcome back, Smile Jammers. A second person has been diagnosed with monkeypox in Jamaica. With the possibility of Jamaicans being exposed to this disease, we've invited occupational physician and public health specialist, Dr. Alverston Bailey, to tell us more about the vaccine that is available to help prevent this virus. Good morning, Doc. Welcome to Smile Jamaica.
Morning, Dr. Al.
Good morning to you, sir. It's a pleasure to share my thoughts with you folks again.
All right. Before we go to the vaccine, sir, how concerned should we be about monkeypox overall? A double-barrel question at the top for you. And what does a global health emergency mean as opposed to a pandemic? So how concerned should we be? And what does that global health emergency mean?
Okay. Let me put things in perspective. Monkeypox is caused by a virus that was discovered in 1958 in monkeys. And then the first outbreak took place in 1970. Interestingly, with respect to monkeypox, it belongs to the pox family of viruses. And there are many poxes. You have goat pox, sheep pox, pigeon pox, and so on. Now, this essentially is a virus that actually normally spreads from animals to humans, and we call that a zoonosis. What has happened is that on the 6th of May, we had one case. On the 6th of June, we had 1,047 cases. On July 6th, we had 7,525. On July 21, we had 15,510. This is a matter of grave concern, and therefore the WHO, looking at the rapidity with which this virus is spreading, decided that this was a matter of great concern, and therefore they call it a global health emergency, because you move from one country, and within about 2 months you had 75 countries being affected. Now, the rationale behind describing it as a public health emergency of international concern is really in order to trigger a coordinated response, and most importantly, to unlock funding to collaborate on vaccines and treatment. And I sense that the WHO is of the opinion that this is one infection that can be nipped in the bud. This is one infection that we can halt in its tracks as quickly as possible, and that it should not spread to the rest of the world.
All right. Well, one of the things, Doc, I mean, you said it belongs to the family of poxes. Is a vaccine call too early? Particularly, I would say, for a country like Jamaica, where we really just are now at a second case, and both cases the persons were coming from overseas and very quickly have been isolated. Is a vaccine call a little bit too early, coming against the heels of I think, kind of the resistance that still exists to the COVID vaccine as well?
That's a good question. The rationale behind calling a vaccine is really to sensitize all countries, really the need to be prepared to address two issues. One, it has to do with prevention of persons getting infected with monkeypox. And the other one is to prevent infection after exposure to monkeypox. So it is not called too early because the vaccines are in fact available. Okay. And in fact, what has happened is that because many of the developed countries had anticipated a particular challenge with respect to smallpox as a weapon of war, they've actually stockpiled vaccines, just in case we were exposed to smallpox. So the reality is that the smallpox vaccines are available, and there are some particular groups that are particularly susceptible to this infection, and therefore it is really meant to sensitize the world about the risk that these groups face, and in order to mobilize funding to ensure that if this particular infection begins to mushroom, that we can nip it in the bud, but most importantly, to cauterize the infection at this point in time by providing vaccines that can protect those who have been exposed and to prevent infection for those who are at risk.
Having said all of that, Dr. Al, does that mean that we should be taking a vaccine for this thing?
No, it does not mean that at all. The important thing to recognize is that monkeypox is very hard to catch. And therefore, we're really looking primarily at persons who are in what one could describe as high-risk category. And therefore, the recommendation that we're entertaining is to provide what is called pre-exposure prophylaxis or PEP to those at high risk of exposure. And I've been reflecting on this somewhat. And I think the groups that we need to consider at highest risk are those who are hypersexual with multiple partners, whether it is gay or straight. If you're hypersexual with multiple partners, you face a grave risk. And therefore, you should recognize the risk you face and access vaccines if you cannot contain yourself. The other group, which I think is very important, are those who are working in the health sector. For example, staff that are expected to provide care to monkeypox cases, staff in sexual health clinics, and workers in labs. But most importantly, and this is something I don't think we've reflected on, that the ground staff that undertake environmental decontamination of materials that have been contaminated by the pox virus also should be protected. The next thing we need to consider then is post-exposure vaccination. This is designed to prevent those who have been exposed from becoming infected. And there are some particular groups that are at risk, and these are children under the age of 10 to 11 who have been exposed to persons who have the pox, people who are pregnant, and those who are immunocompromised. So those are the primary groups that I think we should consider necessary for vaccination, but not for the wider society.
Doc, we're out of time, but curiosity, so I have to ask, in terms of transmission, because a lot of what we hear and see are images of lesions and rashes. I don't necessarily know people who have it, that's really how it looks. But in terms of transmission, does someone have to have the rashes and the lesions to actually move it from person to person? Can someone get the monkeypox from someone who is, I guess, in the process of healing?
Okay, that's a good question. The pox is most transmissible when you actually have the lesions on your skin, and the lesions might contain pus or fluid. When you are incubating the virus, which might take up to 2 weeks, you are really not contagious. But when the pox appears, then you are contagious, and therefore appropriate precaution must be taken both by you and those who are close to you to prevent exposure. So close contact, especially hugging, kissing, and sexual activity, should not take place when the pox appears.
Yep. Final question, Dr. Al. I know with COVID you have, your throat and fever and stuff. Before these lesions or bumps that people might want to call them, do you feel anything? Can I say, boy, I feel like I get something, or is when it come up, you have it?
Okay, that's also a good question. And we call that the prodrome, the symptom you feel before the pox appears. It is characterized by fever, fairly high fever, intense headache, enlargement of lymph nodes in your neck, underneath your arm, in your groin area, back pain, muscle ache, very severe tiredness. Sometimes you end up with sore throat and coughing. And so if these symptoms appear initially, and then about 1 to 3 days later, the pox appears, it's important to remember that the pox appears in the face, 95%, the palms of the hands and soles of the feet, 75%, in the mouth, 70%, which is why you can transmit the pox through talking or shouting or kissing. And it appears in the genitalia in 30 to 40% of cases and in the eye. So therefore, these are areas that one needs to be aware of that can become affected by the pox.
Yep. As always, very well explained, sir. Good to see you as always. Be safe. God bless you and your family, sir.
Thank you very much.
Come on. Dr. Alverston Bailey, occupational physician and public health specialist. Y'all be careful out there. Be very careful out there.